I thank the member. I'll give the call to the member for Chifley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It was a pleasure last Saturday to attend the Tregear Festival, an annual event that's been a terrific draw card for our local community and allows us to showcase much of the local talent in our area. But this year's event was bittersweet because an enormous force behind the festival and our community couldn't join us. Jim Maynard, a friend to both myself and my predecessor Roger Price, wasn't just a great supporter of the Labor Party, but he was a tremendous champion of Tregear. Jim sadly passed away last Friday after a stoic battle with cancer. He was 82. Jim and wife Margaret brought their young family to Sydney from their home in Romford, north-east England in 1965. Jim would proudly speak of his London background and his upbringings close to the famed Bow Bells, but he was equally as proud of the place his family would call their new home, Sydney. To the end, Jim never lost that broad English accent. And after a brief settling-in period in Matraville and East Hills, the Maynards would settle in Western Sydney, and there they would remain. They were one of the first residents of the then new suburb of Tregear, and Jim's daughter Teresa says that they were the very first house in Shackleton Road and watched the suburb develop around them. A fitter and turner, Jim proudly worked for Qantas, and he retired at 65, but keeping still with Jim was never a possibility. Always active in the community, he gave time across 44 years to the Tregear Public School P&C, and he'd helped with the running of the Tregear Festival, working hard with the organising committee. And sometimes he'd just drop by to see how his community was going. For example, the Tregear Presbyterian Church would let me know how he would just stop by Prezzi's Cafe to see who was there, what was happening and what he could do to help. Jim loved his garden, his club life, but most of all, Jim Maynard loved to give of himself. One of the last engagements that allowed Jim and I to share time together was as part of a push with Shadow Health Minister Catherine King to get an MRI for Mount Druitt Hospital, something Jim was deeply passionate about because he was one of those who needed that unit and he was forced to travel elsewhere for diagnosis and treatment. If there was a cause to champion, Jim would be there. That was the fabric of Jim Maynard. And to Jim's children, Michael, Roy, Neil, Teresa, Kathleen, all the grandkids, we say we are sorry for your loss, but we also thank you for sharing your dad with us. Your father's life was rich in many ways, an innings both long and filled with numerous and many memories of community service. He was typical of what Western Sydney stands for, hard-working, family man who, when others suggested it was time to put the feet up, decided instead to channel his energies into projects that made life easier for others. Deputy Speaker, his family tells us that they were having some difficulty finding an available church for Jim's funeral, which happens to be held this morning. But his late wife Margaret must have had the final word because the service will be held shortly at the historic St Bartholomew's Church at Prospect, the place where she's buried. Jim will join her there, a fitting end for a great Western Sydney story.
I thank the member for Chifley.